Green Supply Chain Insights, hosted by Finboot's CEO, Juan Miguel Perez.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Juan, and this is Green Supply Chain Insights. For the newcomers, Green Supply Chain Insights is a series of monthly episodes on YouTube, followed by articles on LinkedIn, where I bring in my own perspective on green supply chain management, the current state of the industry, and some exciting innovations in this landscape. Now, let's get down to business. Following the structure we introduced in our last episode, where I discussed the intricacies of the EU competitiveness compass, and then we zoomed into a specific innovative opportunity in the energy sector, the biogas and biomethane opportunity. Today, we're going to be following that same trend. First, a macro level on recent events, which then lead us to a specific innovative sector that is related to said macro trend. So for today's episode, of course, when we look at the macro level discussion, as you can probably guess, we're going to start with the Omnibus Bill currently making its way through the very complex European legislative process. Now, don't worry, I won't expand too much on it, as I also want to discuss another incredibly relevant report published last month as well. A study titled Delivering on the EU Green Deal by the Joint Research Centre. The JRC is the European Commission's Science and Knowledge Service. It aims to provide evidence-based scientific support to European policy makers. This recent study is a comprehensive report of how we are doing towards our legally binding environmental and sustainability goals. So you can probably understand how these two recent moves or these two recent events are interconnected. On the one hand, you have the JRC publishing data on progress towards our targets, and spoiler alert, we are not doing very great. And on the other hand, you have the Commission proposing changes to already approved legislation, which, if anything, it's looking as if their intentions is to slow us down even more. Later in the episode, we'll then zoom in to our innovation of the day. In this occasion, that is something that can play a critical role on reconciling these two positions. The Commission on simplification of regulation, while at the same time addressing some of the challenges that are slowing us down in the EU Green Deal targets. But I won't spoil this one just yet. You'll have to stick around until the end of the episode to find out what that innovation is. Let's start with the Omnibus. In simple terms, the Omnibus revises and significantly reduces the scope of four major EU Green Deal regulatory frameworks: CSRD, CS3D, the EU taxonomy, and CBAM. In each of them, they are either delaying the implementation timelines, freeing tens of thousands of businesses from compliance, reducing the scope of the regulation and the penalties for non-compliance, and increasing exemptions for goods and volume. Now, in the interest of time, I won't go through each little detail of these changes, but I will leave a link to an external resource where you can go through each of those changes in a bit more detail. But what's perhaps most important is to understand that nothing is set on stone. Absolutely no changes have been approved yet. The step taken by the Commission only initiates that ordinary and, as I said, very complex legislative process. Any changes will require the approval of the Parliament and the Council of the European Union, both of which can introduce amendments to these changes, and considering that there were even misalignments within the European Commission before the Omnibus was agreed and released. Now that group to discussions gets even bigger, we are expected to see a lot more negotiations and a bit of back and forth in this process. Now, some changes should be expected. This process will run for a few months. Hopefully by summertime, we'll have a bit more clarity. Although at the time of this taping, no specific date had been announced by the Parliament or the Council to discuss the Omnibus. But once we do see these changes finalized and confirmed, we need to ask ourselves what that shift really means. Is it regulatory simplification and easing the burden of compliance to help the struggling European industrial complex thrive in a high friction geopolitical environment? That's at least what the European Commission has been insisting that they are doing. Or is this actually an outright full frontal deregulation and a derailment of industrial decarbonization efforts in the EU? That's what some civil organizations, NGOs, and climate activists are claiming based on their own analysis of the Omnibus. Now, to me, what's important is to see the bigger picture. I'm aware of the economic challenges faced by the EU. I think we all certainly are. But I strongly disagree with this claim that our competitiveness loss is due to overregulation on climate. I don't believe for a second that competitiveness and climate action is a zero-sum game. The adaptation to a new, more sustainable economic model, if not a burden for our industries, it is forward-thinking business strategy. With extreme weather events having already cost millions in financial losses and the ever-growing supply chain constraints for foreign critical raw materials, decarbonization, circularity, and sustainability translate to business perpetuity and survival in this complex geopolitical new order. Apologies. Now, from the point of view of attracting investment, the worst thing our leaders can do is to create more uncertainty. Regulatory uncertainty will not attract the much needed capital investment Europe requires to lead in technological innovations to accelerate decarbonization. And why do we need these investments? Well, that takes me to that second theme, the JRC report delivering on the EU Green Deal. Now, I encourage you to go through it. It is an incredibly detailed study that looks at over 150 quantifiable targets across 7 different thematic areas: circular economy, clean energy, biodiversity, mobility, pollution, climate ambition, and agriculture. The study covers, and most importantly, differentiates between targets that are already linked to approved EU directives or regulations, and those targets that have been set, but the regulatory frameworks are still being discussed or are yet to be introduced. The conclusion, in one phrase, is we better speed up. While over 60% of the targets are progressing towards their goal, only 21% are currently on track. The vast majority, nearly 50% of them, require acceleration or they risk missing the target. But what I found most insightful was to look at what happens to those numbers when we only focus on the targets with approved legislation. In that case, our biggest challenge is access to data. For 38% of legislated targets, there's no data available, meaning the JRC couldn't assess progress on those due to lack of visibility and lack of evidence-backed data. For 33% of those, acceleration is needed, and only 15% of currently legislated targets are on track. So, it is clear to me that we are struggling to deliver on the EU Green Deal. And yet, it might seem that the Commission's reaction to this has been to ease up on targets. It's a mentality of, let's just move the finish line closer and it will be fine, except, well, it won't. But now let's talk about what's behind this shift from the Commission, right? So their claim is that the regulatory burden has exceeded beyond expectations. The cost of compliance was getting out of hand, and the impact that was going to have in our small and medium-sized enterprises would translate into full-blown economic slowdown. I, for one, can help but wonder how they've managed to reach these conclusions. especially with the JRC telling them the biggest problem is we don't have data or visibility on nearly 40% of legislated targets. To me, the problem is clear. What we need is to address the lack of evidence. We need more visibility, more shared record keeping, and we need more disclosures. And how can we achieve that? Well, that takes me to my final theme of the day, that innovation, which in this case is that we need widespread adoption of digital traceability and green supply chain management. So everyone, go back to episode 1 and you'll see how we solve this problem. Green supply chain management refers to integrating environmentally friendly practices into supply chain operations, from raw materials to product delivery, disposal, or reinsertion of products in the value chain. The goal is to minimize environmental impact while maintaining efficiency and profitability. Now you couple that with digital traceability so you can track and verify the journey of these products and raw materials throughout their life cycle. The result is you've now enabled businesses to better monitor their supply chains and their production processes. You've simplified and ensured compliance, and you enhance transparency so that by the next JRC report, we are already recording every piece of key information at every stage of the process, leading to a much more positive report on how we are delivering on the EU Green Deal. Forward-thinking European business leaders must start implementing digital traceability in their operations, not just as the means to ensure and simplify compliance, but because it is good for business perpetuity and growth. Now, a good place to start this is with EUDR, the EU's deforestation regulation. With a looming deadline, you have only a few months to take the final call on how your organization will approach EUDR compliance. If you're still struggling or having doubts with where to start, I'm here to help. I would be happy to take you through my experience with some industry leaders that have achieved compliance in record times. Now, with that, it's time to wrap it up. We will be back next month with another episode of Green Supply Chain Insights. Remember, episodes come out every month, followed by a LinkedIn article version of each of those episodes. You can find all episodes on my LinkedIn profile, on Finboot's YouTube channel, or going to finboot.com/insights. Thank you very much for watching and see you next month.